Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to a wonderful Monday night. I'm so glad to be back. So glad to be with all of you. I'm telling you, it feels like forever and a day and then some, but it's good. It's
Yeah.
good. It's good. So thank you very much for taking time out of your night to join us. Drop a little hi in the chat. Say hello to us. Let us know who you are, where you're coming from. If especially if you're new, especially if we haven't talked to you before, we'd love to see that name pop up and say hi.
And I'm just throwing the main chat if you guys are out there watching it on Facebook and such. We can't see all the Facebook chats. We can see that somebody posted, but it says Facebook user. If you click on the link that's in the chat there, that one is where we are at tonight, and you can go there and then follow along and
Or is what I say
engage.
when John's not here is the only one I watch. So if you're
Yeah.
talking on the other ones,
I
tough.
don't know what you're saying.
There's
Yes.
a reason why I'm ignoring you.
Yeah, it's intentional. It's intentional. So tonight, Dan, I wanted to talk a little bit about getting into the whole idea of when you make that decision, is it time to raise your prices? And this is, I kind of contend that there's a couple of times I think it's the easiest to raise your rates as you're looking ahead into the future. And really, I think this is one of those particular times. Maybe not so much for actual 2024 events, but people are starting to get 2025 event calls. I mean, I've had some. I'm sure you've had some roll through, and it's kind of time to be thinking about, should I? If so, if I should, what am I going to base this decision on? If I should or shouldn't, and then if I make a positive decision, how do I go about it? Because I think for a lot of people, this is a huge struggle area.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we've talked different pricing kind of points, not necessarily raising prices, but just like how to establish yourself in some of our previous shows. And I really think, when you're figuring out about the raising the prices, the very first place, and I don't know if you're going to hit this or not, so apologize if
No,
you
go
are, but
ahead. We'll go.
very
We'll be all over the place tonight. So
yeah, the very first thing I think you got to realize is the price that you're charging really making you profit? Right? Like if because I think for a lot of us when we get first started, it's like I'm throwing anything I can into this business to make it work, and then I'll worry about down the road about making money.
mm-hmm.
And so if you're not in that first step of going, this is bringing me stuff, right? It's not just bleeding my bank account to make it work. I'm now bringing the money in the way I should. Now you're in a good position and you can talk about, bringing that up. For other reasons.
Mm-hmm.
But you should be at a point where obviously it's at least breaking you even or making you money, whether it's day one or whether it's day, 1,000. So,
So to kind of build off the is it making you money? I think one of the discussions we have to kind of have is for those who've been in this for a little while, just the concept of am I staying up with inflation with my rates? And there's a really cool CPI inflation calculator here from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And basically, what you can do is say, if I've been in this for 30 some years, so I can go and literally put a number in at a specific time for a contract I had there, and have I kept up with inflation with my rates? So I went and I looked, and there was a contract that I had written in 2000. So we just finished the Y2K, and we survived. And they actually had weddings after that. It was incredible. But in that summer of 2000, my typical wedding show that I was doing right at that time was 1250 is what I was doing for a kind of a base my show that went out the most. There were a few contracts that were a little more because we added videotaping to it. That's something we did at the time. And there were some non-wedding shows that were less, but it's like across the board my weddings were 1250. January of 20 just put it January of 20,000. So to keep up with inflation, not including, advancing with gear and, adding more, I would need to be charging just to continue to make that little bit of money that I maybe calculated back then. I would need to be charging about $2,300 today.
oh, I was expecting it to go much higher than
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
for the inflation. I don't know why my brain was like, he's going to
Oh,
roll out $5,000.
I,
That's what
there,
it's going to say.
exactly. That's what initially I was actually thinking, but then as you break it down, is that there are things that are included with the business today that probably weren't included back then. Back then, I was running. If my whole sound system cost me $5,000, there was no controllers. It was a cheap mixer or inexpensive mixer, let's call it that. But it was a $200 mixer because that's what they functioned, and they did the job of what we were doing. Um, yeah, we had more money in music. There was that, but um, my speakers were $300 speakers, and then I had amplifiers. They were literally $350 amplifiers, and you put it together, and I think I have more invested in gear, certainly more dollars in lighting than I had back
Mhm.
then. So I might have twice the amount of money invested in gear. Not that that would make my initial 1250 doubled, but there were, more realistically, that rate. That probably is closer to a $3,000 difference from then until now because of also having more costs there. So getting back to your point is to make sure that you're making a profit is and you can't just basically rely on making a casual, bumping it $50 every year and still be assured to making a profit.
Yeah, yeah, you definitely can't let yourself get behind the eight ball when it comes to that. I mean, that's when you see a lot of situations where stores and everything are starting to up prices. And I know sometimes it's a little hesitant to do, you're a little hesitant to do that, right? Because you have your retail store, your grocery store, whatever it is, they've all started to increase the pricing, and then you increase the pricing, and it just feels like you're either piling on to the situation, and so it becomes a kind of a difficult point, or kind of could be a breaking point for some of your couples, because it's like, man, I have to pay more for this, and now I'm paying there's more for this, even though they may never have known what you were before.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but in the same respect, it almost becomes a little bit more, I don't want to say expected, but a little bit more like, okay, everybody else is going up, it's going up, so that makes sense, right? It's going to be, he's going to have to pay more. I'm going to have to pay more for said DJ for my wedding than my best friend did 2 years ago, because everything else has gone up. So it makes sense that they would go up. So there is that kind of like, if the costs are going up, that the expectation is that everything goes up.
In a market, whatever the market is, I contend that there's people, I really think it's that bell curve type of a situation. On the one side, you've got no, there's the people they're looking for a $200 investment, and that's it. Then you've got the majority of it is, I think I just saw something on a nod, is like from 900 to 1500 is kind of the middle, and then you've got some of the people who will spend 5,000 comfortably, 10,000 maybe even to get their wedding entertainment, whatever it is. And I think one of the things is that sometimes we run into this person over here that's wanting to spend. I just saw somebody post about this earlier today, that somebody wants things on the day before and the day of the wedding, and they want to spend $600, and they're like, I can't fit that budget. It just won't work. Um, I think this is going to exist forever, and I think sometimes we get so tied up in this, is that all of the rest of the thoughts and such that you've been talking about so far, uh, we just don't think, or we just can't focus on what we should be focusing on. We're focusing on this little over here, and I think that's such a mistake for most DJs, is that there's all of these events, and there's some events over here that you could probably really fit into really nicely and have a profitable business, but over here we're fixated on this $200 person.
Well, I think it's easy to get fixated on it, because it's like, oh my gosh, how on earth could they be asking for so much for so little? Well, two things. One, they probably don't know. And two, that might be their budget, right? That, we can't knock somebody for having a budget. Like, I was talking to you beforehand, right? I'm having this work done in my house. I'm going to have this work done in my house, right? I have a budget. At some point, if somebody came along and told me that project's going to cost you $50,000, I'd be like, it's not happening, right? So people are going to have that budget. Where I would be concerned as a DJ, or any type of entertainment company, any type of company, period, is if you're getting a lot of those inquiries, of those, we'll say that 600 for 2 day type events, right? That low end of the bell curve. If you're getting a lot of those inquiries, I would look at what you're doing to bring them in. If you get them, that's one thing, right? Because your name's going to get put on Facebook or in a group somewhere, or you did somebody else and you did a fantastic. Like I've gotten a call for a wedding after I did a daddy daughter dance.
Sure.
Those things are extremely different. But somebody saw me there and thought I did a great job, so they recommended me to their friend who was getting married. Right? So
Nice.
like those kind of things happen. So I know we're not talking marketing, but if you're getting a lot of those low end ones, look at what your message is that you're sending out, because that could be you're attracting the wrong type of couple, the wrong type of people for your events.
And if you're attracting the wrong ones and you're fixated on that end of the market, it may be difficult to get out of there. I mean, as far as just to
Yeah.
even wrap your head around getting out of there to get to the point where you can become profitable, because no one's profitable over here. And I know many DJs who aren't very profitable on this end either. And it's not because they don't charge enough per show. It's just there's the how many shows are available for them. If I can charge $10,000, but if I'm only doing 2 weddings a year, I'm probably not covering my bases yet. If I can find somewhere where there's more availability, and then of course, when you're in this range, that's when it opens up the opportunity to be able to raise your prices as you are when you have enough business and have those kind of criteria met to make that a logical decision to move forward with that. Let's talk about a little bit about that. What are some telling for those who are like, okay, should I raise my rates? You mentioned profitability. That's obviously huge. If you're not making a profit, that should be your beginning point. But there's going to be other kind of telltale things that are starting to kind of tell you that maybe you need to look at raising your rates. What jumps out at you when I mention that?
The very first thing I think of is Dave Tier. I can never say his name right. It's Canadian, so
Tournier.
that's the problem.
Tournier.
Thank you. Tournier. There we go. Sorry, Dave. The very first thing I think about is a presentation I saw him do. I don't remember how many years ago it was now, but it applies now just as much as it did then. Um, and his philosophy was, if you book, I think it was 5 in a row without any opposition, it's time to raise your rates.
Yeah, I remember that.
Right? Now, I think that might be a little on the drastic side. I think it depends upon how many you do. But to your point, John, if you're getting inquiries that are booking you without really you having to do anything, chances are chances are you're on the lower end.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not the low end, but you're not in that middle, you're definitely not in that high, because you should be having some people that are going, nope, nope, I'm okay. Like you're out of my range. You should have some people that when you give them their price, they say no. Or if they're ghosting you, they're saying no.
Mm-hmm.
And you could say the value thing, right? Like there's people who say, well, I didn't get a chance to show my value. You're right, you didn't. But if and that's the other kind of aspect to it. But if you're booking without having to really show your value, and these are just random inquiries, because that's the other piece I'm gonna put a little asterisk on, right? Because if you're getting them from vendor referrals, you kind of have another edge. But if
Yep.
they're just coming in and they're booking you almost on the spot, yeah, you're getting to that point where you need to think again where you're at.
And I think you take that and you look at it from the perspective of the person who's buying. What is their deciding factor that they're booking you on a spot? Is it that you're the prettiest person in the room? Possibly. Is it that you have the coolest blinky fogger, low lying sparkler thing? Possibly. But if they're making that decision, a cold decision like Dan's referring to, that's probably going to be because price alone. Mitch Taylor made a good post about that. That there were 4 things, and if you can basically alleviate the last 3 items that they would use as stumbling blocks to make a decision to buy, and price is the only one that's left. In this case, if price is the only thing they look at and it fits, that's when they make that type of reaction, which is a good, definitely a good a good indicator. Because you mentioned Dave, of course, mentioning if he did 5 in a row. Drax also, we did some sessions on this a few years back, and one of the things Drax talked about is that if your closing rate is, Dave mentions 5 in a row, but Drex was, if you're closing 90% of your meetings, that's probably, you probably have some room to adjust that you're not there yet. You could probably raise your rates. Like, I want to say 75% is what Drex was recommending.
And
Somewhere.
and that's a number that I've kind of heard. I
Yeah.
remember at just this past year at DJX, Mike Walter and Jason Jen, I both kind of alluded to the fact that their closing rate was around, oh geez, now that I'm trying to think of it, it was like, I want to say it was like 70, it was between 70 and 80. Like it
Yeah.
was, but I felt like it was closer to 70 than 80. And Mike, if you're watching, I apologize if the number was like 20. But it wasn't.
It
It
wasn't.
wasn't.
No, not with us.
But it was just to that end of like, you're not going to close them all. You shouldn't close them all. But you know how hard that is?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like because you're investing time in some form or fashion, whether that's a phone call that you did with them, whether it's a meeting that you set with them, like you spent time trying to bring them in, and then they walk away, and that's difficult to just say, on. But
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
and there's also, and then this is the thing that I think some people need to also kind of get in their brain, and maybe I'm wrong in my thinking here. There's a difference between closing rate and basically cold lead closing rate, right? Like
Very
like when
true.
they're talking about those closing rates, I always envision the fact that they're talking about they've met with this couple, they've at least talked with them, not somebody sent them an email, they sent something back, and then they disappeared. Like I don't, in my viewpoint, I don't count them. I don't count those leads because they don't go anywhere beyond that
Mm-hmm.
as closing rates.
Yeah, that's a great. Yeah, I wonder. I would assume the way you described it is correct. Is that they're not counting just the inquiries. They're when they make a sales pitch that they are closing, um, that percentage. And for those of you who don't have an office and you don't meet, maybe it's the ones that you actually get the phone call and you actually get to have a dialogue. Um, but then again, there's times where they've emailed, I've emailed back, and they request a contract, and that's there was the whole discussion in that little realm but in that case it's mostly people who've seen me, so
Hmm.
it's a little bit different than a cold call where you're now having to really sell yourself, show them what you can bring to the table to help make their day special.
I
uh,
think one other thing that I use to as kind of an indication that I need to um up my game, for lack of better terms, even just up my price, is the venues that I start getting inquiries for.
hmm,
When I raised myself to a certain point, there were some places that I just stopped going to. That I just don't even get any calls for them. I don't get any inquiries for them. Like
right.
I'm assuming they're still doing events, right? I mean, a lot of the times it's fire hall type of places. I'm sure they're still doing something there,
Right.
but I just don't get anything for
Mm-hmm.
it. And so when I start to get some of those locations showing back up, it puts it on my radar. It's not an initial like done, but if I start getting like serious inquiries from those and it's multiple, then I know that I've now worked my way into a different clientele market as well. So it's
That's kind
worth.
of that's an interesting way to do it. I mean, it certainly would work, but it's just I never thought about doing, or evaluating things based on where shows, because in when I let me back up to starting out. So in 2000, I was at 1250. By the time we hit 2012, my summer of 2012, all of my contracts that I wrote were minimum of 2250 or more for my weddings. So when I made that jump, it was interesting to look at that 2012 is my high end venues, or the highest end venues that I worked at. No, I was no longer doing shows at. I was in VFWs. Barns weren't a thing yet. Yeah, I that summer I had 4 or 5 weddings that were at either VFWs or American Legion. I remember one very specifically that I was at. They had build your own cheeseburgers and potato chips. That was their meal. The only thing they really splurged on was me for the night. And I mean, that's just the reality of the situation. Um, that year, if I would have tried to base off that, it would be like, okay, so I raised my rates and I'm not at the really nice venues anymore. I'm over here, but man, we're having some killer parties. Yeah, we're
Yeah,
sad.
and that's why I said it puts it on my radar,
Yeah.
right? Because exactly you could have that situation, and I remember a story, uh, Liz Daly, I think. I mean, this is like again a few years ago. I heard it third party where she showed up to event. She showed up to the wedding. She met with the couple, everything else. She showed up. She was the most expensive thing there by far,
Yeah.
right? And so, you know, if we have the right value to the client, right? If you're a good entertainer and that's what's most important to your client, yeah, you're going to walk into a venue that's probably not the greatest. You're going to probably have XYZ that's not the greatest, but they spent their money on you and there was no question. But I think it also comes down to if you have a bunch of those suddenly starting to creep in where they didn't exist before. That's what I think makes okay, now I have to think about, is
Hmm.
this me? Is this a different clientele? Is my marketing?
Yeah.
Is it my
What's
price?
going on? Why has this happened? That really,
Yeah.
really became a big thing, which ironically at that time, that's when we were doing bridal shows heavily also. So if the two went together, I wouldn't know. There's a couple of things, a couple of directions that came up here in the chat room. One, and again, those of you on Facebook, I can see your comments, but I can't see who it is. Put this, but mentioning that now is probably not the time to raise your rates because the industry is down. And I think this is a very legitimate area, and I wanted to hit this, so we're going to hit it now because uh, in Minnesota, I'm in central Minnesota, and this is something we definitely see a lot of, and people have been. I think did Mike Lenstra do an article about this recently? When Tuesday mornings at 10 o'clock, he has an article each week, Mike's Musings. But basically, they were talking that there just aren't as many weddings out there, and they were wondering if this was, and maybe the not or somebody else mentioned it too. They were wondering if this was basically a COVID kind of a reboundish COVID thing, where people who would have started dating in 2020, I think is what their premise was, that there's a cycle for dating to engagement to married, and that we're seeing a dip in the marriages for 2023 because of that cycle being broken. I think I'm going to look at this a little bit differently from the standpoint of our number. I think for many DJs, their numbers are down, specifically in my type of wedding show or wedding offerings. It is down. There's a couple of caveats with that. In central Minnesota, we have had over the last probably 40 years, our school, specifically one up the road here, 40 years ago, it was basically all a very homogeneous school. It was basically the immigrants that came from Europe, Northern Europe specifically, a lot of Germans, a lot of Swedes, and families that came in, and that's what the community was. Over the last number of years, I just was talking to someone at the school, and 60% of the population in the school right now is coming from Latin American grandparents who grew up in Latin America and have moved up here and have taken any number of jobs and have been part of that community. There's an evolution. Well, those particular grandparents came up, parents are here, now the kids are here. They're getting, there's weddings that are happening in that community, but I, as a person who doesn't speak Spanish and is not fluent in the music, those are weddings that just are off the books for, or I can't, I'm not a good person for those weddings, unfortunately. Well, in my area, if say a typical year with weddings would have been 60 weddings, and now a third, two-thirds, whatever it is, are weddings that are completely off the books just because I can't speak the language, you don't understand, that changes the dynamics of how many opportunities I would have to sell my services. And I think you're seeing part of that for me. And then you're seeing another area, which Dude Walker talked about in 2008. He talked about this, is that the birth rate among the white families was going down. And among many families, instead of having a parent, mom, dad, and 3 children, 4 children, now you're having a mom, dad, and 1.5 children. So we're not even reaching the replacement of the parents, and the population has been going down with that, and that's why a lot of schools are suffering with enrollment. You put these things all together, and we're starting to see that, I think, when it comes to the weddings. And I guess the point with that is that The Nod is trying to, or the whoever it was that talked about it was trying to say that it's probably just a year of blip. I don't think it's going to be. I think we had 2020 that was terrible. 2021 wasn't back. 2022 is crazy. And I think, 2021, 2022 were kind of crazy years. 2023 was the end of the craziness. And I think that's starting to settle down. I think 2024 is the, and Alan Berg doesn't like to use this new normal, but I think it's going to be the future. This is going to be what we're going to be looking like as we go forward. I feel.
You know, the other thing that I would kind of throw out is how much of where we're at right now, and when DJs are saying, business is down, I really wonder how many of them is a short-term memory type of issue. To the point that 2021 was crazy because the 20s got moved to 21 and you had the 21s who wanted 21, and then that carried into 22 as well. 2023 was a little bit of that, but kind of more back to normal. And I think 2024 is, I think it is. You're going to have some of that dating cycle. I really think there's a lot to that dating cycle depending upon the area that you lived in, right? Some areas shut down majorly, like there was no going out, for dinner with like somebody you met. Like you just that wasn't an option. The restaurants weren't even open. So you just had a lot of people that were not meeting to be able to have that cycle. But I think things are going to get back to kind of where they were. Yes, I think population is down. But to that end, as population decreases, so does the percentage of each of those careers within that said industry. So I think at some point you're also going to see some industries like not have the overabundance of DJs, the overabundance of photographers, because there's less people that would be those jobs.
To do those roles. Yeah, that's a very, very good point. And we've seen that cycle over the years. Let's just stick with the DJ side of it, is that we have a period of time where people are throwing parties, and there was good money to be made. 2008 was a great 2008 and 9 was a great example of this, is that the recession of that didn't really slow down shows. But what it did do is some people lost their jobs, some people had cutbacks, and they were looking for a way to make money. Well, people were still partying, and people were still doing their things. As generally, if you've got $10 in your pocket, you're going to spend $8 on entertainment, and then you wonder why $2 won't pay your mortgage, type of thing. That's human nature. So things were going on. So when we got into, we've seen over the years that you get to a point where there's not many, and people are calling. You're like, we can't find a DJ. There's just nobody out there. Everyone we call is out of business. And then all of a sudden, 2 years later, whoa, there's so many DJs that I can't swing a dead cat around without hitting 5 DJs. That kind of a thing. Boy, there's that one, an old person saying for you.
That is.
That is an old one.
I'm surprised you didn't like to mention telling people to get off your lawn while you're at it.
I'm gonna get there. That's my big close for later in the show.
There you go.
So it's a cycle thing, and I think that's an interesting point, that we may be getting to that cycle, but not because of people seeing that getting tired of losing their Saturdays. It might be just that there aren't that many people who are 20 something that want to go out and be in this profession. They won't even get into it. There's just not enough. I don't know. That's a kind of an interesting thing to think about.
Well, and he even can kind of throw out like the idea of uh look at corporate world right now, right? Like there's something that they're battling, which is the idea that the work from home. They're if they don't have the ability or are not willing to be flexible and allow their workers to work from home, they're losing people in droves. You're not working from home as a DJ for a special event,
Yeah.
right? Like at some point we may get there with technology and everything else, but it's not currently where we're at.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have an industry of people who are not willing to do that in a larger sense, I don't foresee them necessarily wanting to put in the time and effort and work that it would be to do special events. I'm not saying that you're not going to have those people. I'm just saying because of where people have kind of gotten with that work from home aspect, they want to go out to have fun. They don't want to go out and put in a long day of work um as their profession in a lot of senses.
And that's actually, let's just continue on that because, well, it's a great little discussion. Now, that work from home thing has been an interesting thing because we're in a very rural area here. I mean, for the first communities, the town is 300 people, very, very small rural area. But there's some of the local bars are finding out is that there are many of us. I'm not unusual being someone who works out of the house here. That there's quite a few of us out here, and as they're putting in the internet around, I'm hearing stories from the phone company saying, we didn't realize we had people out here that were struggling with our dial-up and were using Verizon hotspots to run their businesses. They're like, it was crazy how many we've run across. They're finding that that particular population, or many of them are going out and hitting some of these coffee shops in the morning to go do some things, and they're doing evening entertainment things. So there's some opportunities that weren't there as an entertainer to do something. We've got a couple of bars that in these small towns that are they're doing live bands coming in on Wednesday night. What? They're 1 and 2 piece bands, but they're bringing them in and they're making a few bucks on there for the musicians. And the musicians are great because they're like, yeah, this is wonderful. We get to come in and we're getting paid to practice in essence and do a show. So the opportunities have evolved, and I think that's kind of where you've kind of been mentioning is that today we're in it as things evolve and change and such. There may be opportunities out there that we have no idea of what they may end up being as we go forward. Granted, it doesn't fit the raising our rates right now, but it is part of the bigger picture.
Well, and I will say it does open up the possibility even more for that weekday money,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because somebody who's home all day in their house might be looking for an opportunity to get out of said house for entertainment during the week. So some
Mm-hmm.
of those bar opportunities, some of those trivia nights, some of those whatever, might continue to open up in a greater sense if we continue down the same path of work from homes.
And of course, if you're doing the midweek things and you're making some money on that, that does help kind of get us to circle back to more confidence when it comes to raising your rates, because now I don't have to book every Saturday type of thing. I can go, and if I don't book one Saturday a month for some reason, because I've raised my rates and maybe my closing rate has gone down, well, I have income coming in from multiple sources, and that feeling of not being so dependent on making every sale, I think, is one of the most liberating feelings when it comes to being self-employed. Huge.
And if you have the confidence, it's also it's going to come across that way, right? There's a difference between confidence and egotistical, right? We don't want to go that far, but having that confidence when you're talking with a couple that they feel that, right?
Mm-hmm.
They sense that, and you have more confidence, or they have more confidence in you because of the confidence you're exuding.
So we were at one of the early Mobile Beat conventions back in, well, it wasn't early, it was early 2000s. Before, that was back when Mike Monacorso and Bob Lindquist had it. I'm sitting with someone at in the casino bar there, where all the good talking happens. And they were talking price. How do you raise your price? How would you do this? And it's like, well, because they were just having a terrible time closing. So it's like, let's just start. Let's not, how do you, when someone says, hey, DJ Fred, how much do you cost? And they were timid. You could detect embarrassment by them talking, but when they shared the price, they were almost apologetic with their price and talking about their services. And it was like, oh my gosh, as I'm sitting there, there's like no way I would buy something from you, because if you don't have the confidence, you don't have the faith, you're basically apologizing in advance for charging me to do. It's like, are you that bad that you're apologizing already? Then they weren't. They were I've actually
Mhm.
seen them perform, and it's like, oh my goodness. There's first off, in order to raise your rates, wrapping your head around that idea that money is just a thing that helps this process. And it doesn't matter if it's $100 or if it's $10,000. It's just a number, and what you deliver is what's ultimately the important part of it. So making it apologizing, I mean, you can apologize for $100 because you probably need to, because at $100 you're going to do such a crappy job because you're going to be so like, oh my gosh. But it was just really tough to listen to, because it started there. That was a big part of it. Ugh, crazy. So there was another one here. I wanted to see, and thank you guys for the chat's been doing really, really well. Um, Kylie from Southern Minnesota, thank you for being with Kylie there, mentioning that they've got a slow start to the booking season too, and finding out that there's lower budgets out there. And I can contest. We had a great fall with booking for the shows, but it has gotten it's just slowed down tremendously. Usually there's a Christmas bump for us. I don't know if you saw anything for a Christmas bump this year, Dan, but it was really, really quiet. And then yet talking to Cubby the other day, he's been pretty much consistent, with his calls and bookings and things, and part of that probably has something to do with there's actual bridal shows in his area, and there aren't really any in our area.
One of the things that I would caution when you're thinking about price increases and things of that nature, one of the things that sometimes DJs will ask is, ask the couple what is their budget. Um, I feel like that's a problem that you run into. So if you ask a couple their budget, they're going to give you the number. That doesn't mean that they have any idea what actually goes into that number that they came up with.
Mm-hmm.
It could be a great aunt that got married 30 years ago who said that that's how much they paid for the DJ, or it could have been their best friend who had a very different type of DJ than what you are. So to ask what their budget is for their DJ, I think is kind of difficult to use. But a lot of DJs will ask that and then get the impression that the couple is low budget when really they're just an uninformed budget.
And I think there's
So,
a spot to use that though, Dan. And I think the problem where DJs use that is that they use that as kind of an opening. So how much do you charge? Well, do you have a kind of a budget set up for your wedding day? I think that's where it comes from.
mhm.
And yet I think there's a spot to use it. Maybe not exactly what's your budget type of thing, but I'm going to circle back to you were talking about having some work done on the house. We were had a couple of contractors come in to look at some help of that. And then we did our thing, and they went through and put and they came back, went out to the car, called their manager, did that thing, and they came back in the house, and here's the number. And we looked at the number, and they're like, is that kind of where you're expecting to be? Is that, they brought it up, does that kind of fit into, where you wanted to be price-wise? Does it fit into your budget for this project? And it was actually kind of a nice way to deal with it, because then we could say, gosh, no, we were only allocating, $4.3 million instead of $4.5 million for the new light fixture you want to put up. There could be that discussion, and it's like, that's actually kind of a nice way to do it. So how much do you charge for weddings? Well, let's find out what you would like so far, or like, and then what you need for the day, and talk about your day. And okay, here's my recommendation. My recommendation for your day to be able to do all these things and bring myself in as an entertainer and do that and have a great night is going to be this. Oh, well, is that kind of where you're thinking you wanted to be for the night? I think that there is a spot to discuss it, but I think if you put it too early, it can send so many wrong messages really quickly.
Well, anytime I get asked that kind of question, like right out of the gate, I'm like, if I give them a high number, are they just going to inflate the price because I gave them a high number? So do keep that in mind. Like you don't need to rush out and ask that right away. But I do understand it. That does make sense, with that. So.
And there have been times, I mean, when you've been in this for as long as we have, you've done a lot of bad sales type techniques. And there was a time where, the idea was early on when they mentioned that, it would be the response, well, did you have kind of a budget set for where you wanted to be at? And there were a few times where they mention a number and it's like way higher than what I was going to quote them. And then you're like, oh, man, did I just screw up and, not, I should have looked at that and said, wow, they're expecting a professional DJ that should charge up here. Maybe my rates aren't high enough and I need to, be looking at it. No, I was basically, I left all that money on the table. That was just, yeah, crazy. So, we talked about profitability. Closing is certainly another big one. How is it, when it comes to setting your prices and choosing the times when you have raised price or you've heard people raising price, how much do you think what others are doing in the market plays into the picture? Is that a real factor, or is that just one of those things that I do what I need to do and the rest, they do their thing?
For myself, it plays in a factor. It plays a factor, and one of my competitor friends tends to watch this, and so he'll probably like give it a listen, and then I'll hear about it tomorrow as he's running. Um, but the piece that I often do, and this is kind of bad, but I've gotten to a point where I pride myself that I'm probably not the highest in the area, but I'm pretty darn close. So when I find out that somebody else that around me who I don't consider to be of the level that I am, and I'm not talking about the friend of mine that watches the show, Keith, you're not who I'm talking about here. Um, but when I find out that somebody who's not at the level that I am is charging a price that's getting close to mine, it's time for me to raise it. It's time for me, even if it's just $100, even if it's just something to go. I'm not them, right? Like I almost want a couple to go. Why is he more expensive?
Hmm.
He's not to the point where it's going to be like, oh my gosh, he's close, but he's more expensive. Maybe we have to look at this more.
For sure.
And I like that aspect of it. As crazy as it is, I like using that aspect to kind of help me go in that realm. So when I find out, like, because every once in a while, a few of them will be like, "Oh, what are you charging now? What
Hmm.
are you
Hmm.
charging?" Okay, oh, you're there. All right, it's time for me to have another small increase.
For
Um,
sure.
so that's how it plays in for me. I know there's other people who use it as kind of a monitor of like, you know, the people that they really feel are the exact same as them price wise, they're going to go with them, right? So they're not going to be left behind, but they're also not going to be the first one to jump in the pool.
Hmm. And I think one area in which we use to find that information, you're talking in some cases about people you have a relationship with, and you can ask, and you're confident that they're going to give you a fairly accurate answer. Some markets, of course, that doesn't work that way, so we rely on maybe the venue. The venue talks about it because many of the venues will ask the clients, or they'll ask the couple and say, "So how much was your DJ?" I've had that happen dozens of times where they've been like, "How much is that guy? He's really good." And how what would and then sometimes they're like, "Wow, you're a $3,000. I mean, you're good, but we can't afford $3,000 DJs in our market." It's like, "But I'm here playing for an event at your venue. What's up with that?" But anyway, um, sometimes when the venues are giving you information, because I can go and I can ask and I can get reviews on every DJ that comes through one of the particular venues. She's very, very good at that. But she'll be talking about, that, yeah, that DJ was here and he I think he charged like $600. He was dirt cheap. Well, if it was $600 last month when he did the wedding, he booked it 2 years in advance, type of a situation. And maybe back then he was $600 and that's what he was booking at. But since then he's maybe been increasing his rates because he's become, he's his calendar's so full, he's got to be raising his rates to try to to be able to handle things and make it worth his time to be out there. So in that particular case, that he was $600 in June, and now for the upcoming year, he could be $1,200 for all we know. It's sometimes, my point is basically is that you can't. Sometimes the information of where the prices are from other vendors isn't accurate, and it could be just a completely innocent thing, or it could be that they're misleading you. Because there's
Yeah,
DJ
and
DJs well.
but in the same respect, one of the things that you can also do is as the discussion of prices is out there, and should I post my prices on my website or should I not, right? Like you can do a quick search of the DJs in your area and see what product it is that they're putting out there, like what or price range, and some will have their full brochure on their website,
Exactly.
right?
Yep. Some
So
do.
you can at least get an idea of what some of them are doing. Now granted, their website could be outdated, etc., like in those type of situations, but it's at least giving you an idea, at least
Hmm.
gives you kind of a footing for that.
Yeah, that's for sure. Let's talk, kind of wrap things up, talking about if you're going to raise your rates, and we're looking at right now, say that you've got maybe half of your dates you want to book for 2024 are filled. So you have some 2024 dates, but you want to be raising your rates for 2025. And say your idea is that, okay, I feel confident that I am worth $200 more for my 2025 weddings, whatever the number is. How do you handle in your situation, Dan, if that was a decision you made, would you have it so that the rest of your 2024 events would be at this new price? Would you have a 2024 price and then a different price for 2025? How would you handle that transitional period?
I used to do the changes on the year. And then I realized how, for lack of better terms, ridiculous. And I think Dave did this, Turnier did this in that same recording, which was the idea of like, when you're gonna do it, just do it. Just do it, and that's the way it is. So many of us now, especially like with our like DJ event planner and that we have the ability to put the prices in. So you don't have to worry about, okay, did I quote that person at this price? And then did I quote how much money do I have to come? And like that was one of the reasons why I always waited for the new year, because then it was the easiest for the bookkeeping. But if I'm doing an electronic bookkeeping, that's going to help me worry about all those pieces without having to think about it. So I would say once you decide to make that jump, just do it. And anybody else that comes in is going to be at the new one, because you're going to have that confidence. It's also now going to be the price that's in your mind. So you don't have to like get lack of confidence. Did I remember to up the price, or wait, was it what was the 2024 price? And
Mm-hmm.
like that can bring you down from that confidence. The one piece though that I would say, if you're thinking about making a change and you're just not 100% sure, start with your busiest time, the time you know you will be booked no matter what, right? So if fall weddings are when you are always booked no matter what, start with your do a fall, do almost like a prime date increase, and see how that goes. Because the nice thing is, if you have a couple couples that pass on you at this new price, you can always go back and you're still probably going to get a call for that date.
Sure.
But if you're looking, like for me, I mid-July, I don't get anything, right? So if I pass on a couple or two at a new price in mid-July, it's chances are that Saturday is going to stay open, because I only get a small window of opportunity for some of those dates.
Sure.
So if you're thinking about that, like that might be a way to test the waters without having to worry about, uh-oh, what happens if this just fails? I still have a place I can go.
And I always like that idea when you're a year out and you're getting those calls, is that's a great time, especially during those prime, prime dates or prime months. It's a great time to practice the that the idea is that I'm going to confidently be able to talk about my services and what I can bring to the table, and the investment will be blah blah blah. It's just great to be able to practice that. Now when you get to be the point of where you're a month or two out, then you can make a decision based on where you're at or what you need for keeping things going. But overall, as you say, right now, if it would be a fall wedding, which some of those dates are in months, I think September is like all booked up. Pretty much, if there's nothing I could do, but I could have used that as a practice time frame to go and ask for more on those dates. One last area. Do you need, when you're having a conversation with a couple, do you need to justify your rate from the standpoint of that, oh, I was 2,000 last year and I'm 2,500 this year, and it's because of X, Y, and Z? Is that a conversation you need to have?
No, don't even bother, right? Don't, because now you're getting into defensive mode, and it comes across that way. Like if a couple comes back to you and was like, well, you did my best friend's wedding and you were only this price, okay, then you might want to say, okay, this is why there's been a price increase. But unless it's called on the carpet, unless it's questioned, there's nobody there's you don't go to the grocery store and ask them why they're suddenly charging an extra dollar for, macaroni and cheese, right? You just pay it because that's what the price is. And so if you just put your price and that's what it is, that's going to be the thing. So,
I
yeah.
love that. I love that phrase, defense mode, because I think that that's such reaction that we have when people start to, and we get defensive. It's like, well, I added sparklers that can shoot rainbow colors, and they'll be able to put fog across the floor. Well, grandma's throwing lasagna across the room. It'll be great. No, 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 no. You don't have to do that.
I'm going to mention one other thing while we got like a brief second
Yeah.
here. Something that also gave me the best confidence to charge more, right? Like so that was the other thing. Like in the early days, like I was so low, like I didn't know better. And then as I learned, I recognized that I had to charge more. But the jumps where I was able to charge more and felt the most confident is when I came off of a workshop training.
Sure.
Whether it was investing in Alan Berg stuff and listening to his CDs and that, and to understand, and from that standpoint, in a workshop that I went through with him, or whether it was the Marbecca stuff when I've done two different other workshops. There was the Audio Amazing that I did with Ron Ruth. It was like every time I came out of not a convention, but a workshop, a training, like I'm putting in elbow grease to be better. Instantly, I came out and go, that's it. I'm going up $100.
Yeah,
I'm
for
going up
sure.
$200. Didn't even, wasn't even like, well, should I do? No, like I just put in this work and effort. I'm worth more.
Hmm.
And that helped. I was nervous the first time the price went out, but you had, like, in my mind, I knew I was worth more
Hmm.
because I put that effort in.
There have been times where I've gone and I've come out to the office here and just started putzing with a controller, and 2 or 3 hours later, after you practice for a while, and it's like, man, I made some really good mixes here that I could use at my shows. And then I think about, okay, so if I add those to my shows, and there's going to be this level of excitement and things that I just practicing makes it feel like I'm bringing more value to the thing. And we can practice all the time, but the idea is that I can do that. I mean, heck, just even going back to our fitness thing that we've been doing, the quality of my show when I'm able to bounce around and do things and feel better is so much better. There's value to those things. So when it gets to that point of saying, hey, I'm bringing more to the table in my mind, as far as saying I'm bringing more to the table, you can really truly see it, that we are indeed, with our training and with the things we do that most people don't see. It does add up. Yeah, the mac and cheese stuff. I was thinking you were going to go, hamburger. How hamburger went up so much, because it kind of did. So, some thoughts for those of you, for someone out there, if you're thinking about raising your prices. We didn't even get into the idea of so many gigs and expanding your business, and is it more profitable to expand your business or to raise your rates. We didn't go there. That is a whole discussion that really could be, it'll be another night down the road somewhere, because I think that for a lot of people, that's a slippery slope to add systems, and it can be profitable and beneficial. And for some people, it can be the first step in killing their business. And I've seen both ways over the years. Some people who have been like, "Yep, I'm adding 3 shows," and 2 years later they're out of business. It can happen. Yeah. So future show with that. So up next, the hanging with Howie. I don't think Howie's going to be with the crew tonight. I think John. I think I saw John around. But DJNTV.com/chill, pop out there. They're going to be. They record a Monday night kind of a hangout show, a topic, and everyone talks about that for a little bit. And you guys can have some fun there. It's a Zoom meeting, so when they're recording, if you want to be part of it, great. If not, just shut off your camera and microphone and hang out, and then once it's done, everything will open up, and you guys can have a great evening with that. And then we've got a couple of more videos that'll be dropping this week, so you can check those out. They'll be hitting the channels, and then tomorrow night, 10 o'clock Eastern, that will be the Tuesday night music recording, again at djntv.com/chill. Tomorrow night, Big Daddy has Dave Hanscom on, and that will be coming to you at 9 o'clock Eastern. So they'll be talking a little bit about that, and you guys, about Dave and his story, so that'll be kind of fun to catch up with him. So I think that's it for tonight. Holy cats, we're almost at 9 o'clock.
Ooh, it goes fast. Well, anyway, thank you very much, everybody, for taking time to join us. I know a lot of you were sleeping, maybe after being up late last night with the game, but we do appreciate you spending some time, and maybe we gave you some inspiration to better yourself, to make yourself a little bit more profit, whatever might happen to be the case. We hopefully have inspired you to do something more with your business. So thank you very much. Have yourself a good one. We'll see you next time, everyone.